aboard the brunt of the US-China trade war. CNA's Tan Se-hui traveled there to find out how the world's second-largest economy is bracing for Trump 2.0.
The US-China rivalry reached new heights during Donald Trump's first term as he took on China using tariffs and tried to tackle the trade imbalance, aiming to curb the rise of one of Asia's largest economies. Even China's growing military power wasn't off limits. Now with Trump back in office, the big question is, will he double down on his efforts to outmaneuver China? The stakes are high, and some wonder if he's facing a losing tariff war with China, or if he'll finally achieve what Biden didn't. Watch till the end to find out more. Trump re-election. Donald Trump was first elected president in 2017, and he shocked the world as he became the first person without any government or military experience to be in this position. Later, he lost the election to Biden, and the citizens thought he would never be in power again. By November 2024, he was elected for a second non-consecutive term as the 47th president of the United States. Now that Trump is the president, many analysts are waiting for how he would change the policies, especially since his terms were not consecutive. Some are expecting problems for Russia, especially with the war in Ukraine. Others are worried about the US-Mexico relationship, especially with Trump's previous perspective on immigrants. Trump created a playbook of tactics against China's economic and military rise in his first presidency. There were policies like punitive tariffs, which were expected to rebalance trade deficits and contain China's growth. His strategies had aggressive trade policies, aimed at curbing China's influence on the global stage, which is a long-standing concern for U.S. economic leaders. At the center of Trump's strategy were the tariffs designed to make Chinese goods more expensive for American consumers, to reduce the U.S. dominance on Chinese imports. Trump argued that these measures would protect American industries from unfair competition. Trump was also involved in China's growing military capabilities. His administration tried to stop the transfer of advanced technologies, including telecom equipment and semiconductors, to Chinese firms. All these policies were controversial, but Trump was committed to maintaining American supremacy. He argued that this was the only way for China to remain as the dominant economic and military power of the world. As Trump starts his second term, he will be facing more self-reliant China. It was highly difficult for the U.S. to defeat China the first time when Trump was president. Now that he's in power again, he is focused on fighting against China. His previous efforts did not halt China's global export dominance, so his new strategies will likely set the tone for future global power dynamics. China rises as an economic power. China's rise as an economic power started in 1978, when it underwent major economic reforms under Mao Zedong. This caused the country to transition from a centrally planned economy to a more market-oriented system, allowing for rapid export-driven manufacturing. China took advantage of its large workforce and attracted a lot of foreign investment. All of these contributed to its high GDP growth rates over several decades. The Chinese government also played an important role in guiding economic development, including strategic industrial policies and investment in sectors. It has gained a lot of economic progress after becoming part of the World Trade Organization. This marked a major era of global trade and lifted many Chinese people from poverty into the middle class. When China joined the WTO, it was able to increase its exports to other countries, especially due to lowered tariffs and greater market access. This also led to rapid economic growth, as Chinese products were often cheaper than locally made items. Joining the WTO encouraged many countries to invest in China, especially its manufacturing sector, as it offered a large workforce and lower production costs. China's economy has changed from an agricultural base to an export-oriented manufacturer, and this led to job creation and urbanization. China could also open its service sectors, including insurance, banking, and telecommunications, to foreign investment. However, as China's economy grew, other countries faced competition from its low-cost goods, just like the United States. It's no surprise that Trump saw China as a threat to the U.S. supremacy as the superpower of the world. In 2015, China announced its Made in China 2025 plan, part of its reforms to dominate the global economy. The Made in China reforms, especially China's economic reforms and open-door policy, focused on spreading China's goods worldwide. A Chinese government initiative launched in 2015 focused on turning China's manufacturing sector from low-cost, low-value goods to one with more advanced technology. This elevated China's position in the global manufacturing landscape. China's policy targeted 10 key high-tech industries like robotics, information technology, renewable energy, and new materials. It also encouraged Chinese companies to develop their own technology and intellectual property instead of relying on foreign technology. With the Made in China reforms, the Asian country sustained high economic growth and industrial development. It also led to rural transformation, increased consumer power, and attracted foreign investments. Today, China's economy is still growing because of its export-oriented manufacturing. The country focuses on increasing domestic consumption to avoid reliance on other countries and technological advancement. It has a robust manufacturing sector, a large domestic market, heavy reliance on exports and high-tech industries. With how strong China is today, it would be hard for Trump to fight against him. Experts now say that Trump is facing a losing tariff war with China. Trump against China in his first term. Donald Trump has promised to levy larger tariffs on imported Chinese goods when he takes office for a second term. But many people wonder how this would go, especially after his first trade war with China. In 2016, Trump made China a major campaign issue, calling the country an enemy and saying that it was ripping the US off. Then 1 year later, Trump held a summit with the Chinese president, Xi Jinping, at Mar-a-Lago. He delivered a sharp and shocking message about his perspective on the China-US relationship there. His words also shocked the Chinese president and government as they realized that the Trump administration was determined to compete with them economically. Trump had also accused the Chinese administration, saying that China was stealing intellectual property from US and other Western corporations. China had to issue a statement against this, denying anything about a technology transfer. President Xi also ordered diplomats in the United States to tap into their fighting spirit and adopt a more aggressive communication style. By 2018, Trump took his first step in the tariff war, implementing a 10% tariff on Chinese aluminum, 30% tariff on solar panels and electric vehicles, and 25% tariff on steel. He also imposed tariffs on almost everything else that was made in China. Like this, the tariff war would continue for years to come. It attracted a response from China, who accused the US of typical trade bullying and revealed they planned to take the necessary countermeasures. China responded by moving its exports and imports to other countries, rather than dealing with the US. For instance, instead of buying soybeans from the US, it started to buy from Brazil. Trump's plan to declare war against China had backfired because it led to a tit-for-tat tariff increase, affecting both countries. The US lost a lot of opportunities to trade with China, and it also led to a trade deficit. With the lack of Chinese goods, there was a decline in US manufacturing jobs and an increase in intellectual property theft. Also, the cost imposed by tariffs was eventually passed along to the consumers of imported goods. China had told the United States that this was the consequence of imposing tariffs. However, the United States thought reducing reliance on Chinese goods would eventually spark outrage among the people. Trump also moved to block Huawei and persuaded other allies to do the same to disrupt China's tech ambitions. The Trump administration went a long way in trying to cut off Huawei's access to the US. Huawei is a telecom giant in China, and Trump was determined to keep it out of America. However, the ban didn't stop Huawei from advancing, as it remains popular worldwide. What's more, Trump accused China of using its technological products like Huawei and TikTok to spy on US citizens, which was revealed to be false. Still, the relationship between the US and China was numb throughout Trump's presidency. Many people thought that it would change when Biden eventually came into office. Biden's perspective of China. Trump and Biden don't agree on a lot of policy issues, but when it comes to trade policy with China, they seem to agree on this point. In fact, Biden maintained many of the tariffs on billions of dollars on Chinese imports right from the Trump administration. At the same time, he continued to grant tariff exclusions to particular industries. One would have thought that this would move the US government forward, but it has actually hurt US businesses and consumers along the way. Biden had a chance to change the course of the US-China relations, as it had hit a low point under the Trump administration. But he didn't, and the relationship became worse. From the moment Biden became the president, he said he was not rushing to change Trump's administrative policies against China, and this was the first sign that he wouldn't try to ease the relationship. By 2021, US and Chinese diplomats spoke over the phone, but it was a tense conversation. The US diplomats focused more on human rights and the military coup that was happening in Myanmar. But China told the US to stop interfering in the internal affairs of China and instead to respect China's sovereignty. That same year, Biden and Xi spoke on the phone, but the conversation was pretty much the same. The US focused on economic practices, and China asked for mutual respect. A month after this phone call, the US expanded its tariff exclusion to Chinese medical products till September 30th, just because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The tariff war became worse when 5 Chinese companies, including Huawei, were blacklisted by the US Federal Communications Commission. The US also sanctioned mainland China and Hong Kong officials before the important talks in Alaska. They even placed sanctions on the financial institutions that were working with these officials. The US-China war continued, with the FCC moving against Chinese telecom firms over national security concerns. The US continued to blacklist different Chinese companies. They also added 7 Chinese supercomputing entities to the blacklist, trying to leave China with nowhere to turn. Biden also released policies under his rule, including the Strategic Competition Act of 2021. This was a 300-page act that was supposed to counter China's global influence and keep the U.S. as the global leader. He also passed the U.S. Innovation and Competition Act of 2021 to boost the U.S.'s technology and compete with China. Biden even started working with other countries like Japan, as the 2 countries made a joint announcement. The U.S. even made a jab at China by investing in different technology areas in Japan. Biden didn't hesitate to expand the bans that Trump had made, eventually stopping American investors from using Chinese firms. At least Biden withdrew a few executive orders made by Trump to download China-owned apps like WeChat and TikTok. China fighting back. China didn't sit still as the U.S. was trying to win against it economically. It started with the anti-foreign sanctions law, which was meant to help China to counter the U.S. sanctions made over its trading activities and technology sector. The U.S. had added a lot of Chinese businesses to its blacklist, and China decided to get its revenge. It imposed sanctions against 7 citizens and entities in retaliation for the U.S.'s earlier sanctions on its own officials. This was the first time China placed counter-sanctions measures, especially with its new law. China also extended its tariff exemptions on 81 products from the U.S., which included shrimp, timber, electric vehicle batteries, microscope, and some other medical testing instruments. China announced countermeasures against U.S. defense firms and executives, including freezing assets and banning the transactions of U.S. defense companies in China. China has also announced some policies to retaliate against the U.S., especially in its technology sector. The U.S. cannot import gallium, antimony, and germanium from China. There are now a lot of controls on the semiconductor manufacturing equipment, software tools, and more. From Trump to Biden, the conflict between the 2 countries continued back and forth. The U.S. would blacklist Chinese products, and China would impose counter-sanctions in turn. The U.S. boycotted the Beijing Olympics and banned a lot of Chinese companies and individuals, including the top AI firm in China. China retaliated, showing the U.S. they could not be looked down on. The situation became more intense when China canceled all the U.S.-China talks and even sanctioned Nancy Pelosi and her immediate family members, saying that she had disregarded China. This worsened the relationship between the 2 countries, with the U.S. retaliating with more sanctions. The U.S. and Chinese governments are still in a deadlock, with the 2 countries constantly holding meetings and peace talks, but with no progress to stop the trade war. It's all about who can come out on top as the most powerful country economically and technologically. China's attempt to fight back has been very painful for different industries in the United States, including the semiconductor sector. China has blocked all the corporate mergers with semiconductor companies. What's more, China has banned the purchases of Micron chips, which is a major blow to China. Micron lost access to Chinese customers, as its previous total sales were $3.3 billion per year. This was also a major problem for the United States. China has also made it hard for the U.S. to export gallium and germanium. With this move, China has threatened to exercise its control on the mineral supply chains of the world. An export ban on these minerals will hurt the U.S. more than China, giving them a chance to dominate the minerals trade. So each time the U.S. tries to inflict pain on China, they end up hurting themselves even more. China invests in exports. China has been focused on getting an edge over the U.S., and one of the ways it has done so is with its export strategy and technology sector. This is especially true in high-tech industries like electric vehicles, even if it has been facing a lot of trade restrictions from countries like the United States. Rather than being deterred by geopolitical pressures and sanctions from the US and Europe, the Chinese government has adopted different strategies to rise even higher. One of the key sectors in which China excels is the production and export of high-tech goods, including EVs, semiconductors, and renewable energy technologies. Chinese firms like BYD, NIO, and KTL dominate the EV market by offering competitive pricing, advanced technology, and high manufacturing efficiency. The United States, concerned about China's rapid growth in strategic industries, has imposed restrictions such as tariffs and export bans on key technologies. These measures are designed to limit China's access to foreign markets and critical resources, but China has countered with strategic adaptations that minimize the impact of such restrictions. China has been expanding its global manufacturing footprint, even building factories out of its country and in places like Thailand, Brazil, and Hungary. This has allowed the company to prevent high tariffs on Chinese-made goods. The Asian country has been significantly increasing its investment in exports and is now the world's largest exporter. China's exports exceed other countries in many product categories. China has a vast manufacturing infrastructure and a large workforce, which allows for the large-scale production of goods at competitive prices. Its economic strategy has focused a lot on export-driven growth. However, even if its traditional manufacturing is strong, China has been investing in newer areas like electric vehicles and renewable energy, especially as it tries to edge over the US. China has been focused on bypassing these trade restrictions, but working with other countries besides the US has soon boosted its geopolitical influence. China's Belt and Road Initiative further complements these efforts. By investing in infrastructure and trade networks across Asia, Africa, and Europe, China ensures smoother logistics for its exports while strengthening its economic alliances. This network of investments enables Chinese companies to access diverse markets and mitigate risks from potential sanctions or supply chain disruptions. Trump's plan for his new term. Now that Trump has been announced as the next president of the United States, there has been a sense of urgency in the country, as many citizens are rushing to stock up on foreign goods. That's because they are anticipating his tariffs like the first time, which would further affect the economy. The president-elect has already promised to impose tariffs on China and other countries like Canada and Mexico, as he believes this would stop drugs and migrants from flowing into the country. In his first term, Trump claimed that he was using tariffs to punish China for its unfair trade practices. But now he's saying that he would be placing tariffs to stop the flow of illegal drugs and undocumented migrants. He has already promised to place an additional 10% tariff on Chinese goods from the first day of his administration. Trump has also promised that he would impose tariffs on 60% or more of imports of Chinese goods. According to him, these tariffs would continue until Beijing stopped the flow of fentanyl, a synthetic opioid, into the U.S. Trump's allies have also suggested that the president-elect sees the threat of tariffs as a bargaining chip to use in negotiating with China in the future. After all the statements from Trump, China responded, saying that a trade war would not benefit either of the countries. After all, past history has shown that the U.S. and China suffered a lot during the trade war, especially the U.S. According to a recent poll, almost half of respondents said that they were planning to make a lot of purchases before Trump entered office. Others have said that they are adjusting their financial plans for the next year. Many have said that they are making these purchases because they are expecting prices to rise once Trump implements his tariffs. If Trump eventually places tariffs on China, it could increase the prices of laptops and tablets by 46% and of smartphones by 26%. Household appliances are also expected to increase after this. All of these are placing a lot of pressure on Americans ahead of Trump's presidency. According to Trump, tariffs made this country money. And we never really got the chance to go all out because we had to fight COVID in the last part. We did it very successfully. Ongoing U.S.-China confrontation. The rivalry between the United States and China will intensify during Donald Trump's second presidential term. Building on the confrontational policies of his first term, Trump's administration is likely to double down on efforts to maintain American global supremacy. These strategies will involve heightened economic, technological, and military measures to counter China's rise as a peer competitor on the world stage. From Trump's first presidency in 2016, his administration implemented a lot of tariffs, export controls, and sanctions targeting Chinese companies. These were part of a broader strategy to rebalance trade deficits. These efforts did not bring the results that the U.S. wanted, especially affecting its economy. Even when Biden took over, the trade wars didn't slow down, but further intensified, leading to more conflict between the countries. Biden also blacklisted a lot of Chinese companies and entities trying to keep China in check. A second Trump term is likely to see the continuation and escalation of such measures, with additional restrictions on Chinese technology, exports, tighter controls on investments, and expanded sanctions on entities linked to Beijing's industrial and military ambitions. Trump's administration is expected to prioritize strengthening military alliances, such as AUKUS and Quad, to counterbalance China's assertiveness in the South China Sea and Taiwan Strait. Military drills, arms sales to Taiwan, and joint exercises with allies in the Indo-Pacific are likely to increase as part of efforts to project power and deter Chinese aggression. Trump's second term may also focus on decoupling the American economy from China. Policies aimed at reshoring manufacturing, diversifying supply chains, and reducing reliance on Chinese imports are expected to accelerate. Additionally, diplomatic efforts to rally allies into adopting similar strategies, such as banning Chinese technology giants like Huawei or imposing coordinated sanctions, will likely play a central role. What do you think of Trump's plans for another tariff war with China? Leave your thoughts in the comments and be sure to like and subscribe for more interesting videos.